An image of a young Bruce Wayne tumbling down into a cave. He is put upon by a number of bats. Then something shuffles out of sight. Something sucks the stale air and hisses, gliding with ancient grace, unwilling to retreat as his brothers did, eyes gleaming, untouched by love or joy or sorrow, breath hot with taste of fallen foes, the stench of dead things, damned things. Surely the fiercest warrior, the purest survivor, glaring, hating, claiming me as his own. Welcome once again to the Shadow Gallery, folks. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly, and yes, tonight is a special edition where I will be talking to you about the film that I just saw, which is Batman: The Dark Knight Returns Part 1. Now this is, of course, part of DC Animated's attempt to bring the seminal tale by Frank Miller to the small screen in animated form. As they had done previously with Batman Year One. But if we're going to talk about this film, we first need to talk a little bit about this title. Now, if you've been living in a cave, or have never opened up a comic book before, a lot of what happens in this movie is bound to fly over your head. Because we have essentially here, this is Frank Miller's, as I said, it's his seminal work. This is the thing that put him on the map. Say what you will about the work that he did with Marvel and Daredevil prior to this. This is what got the world's attention as far as looking at Frank Miller and saying, this guy is an extraordinary fucking talent. This man writes a book that is almost unmatched in quality, in content, and in really social commentary. Now, this, of course, originally came out in 1986. Now, I've talked about 1986 that year before in one of my videos, where I talk about that this is basically the year that changed comics forever. It was, obviously, it was the year that this came out. It was also the year that Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' Watchmen came out. So, two real big things happening, like I said, just absolutely mind-blowing events from DC Comics that happened in one year, and nothing could match them from any other publisher. And there weren't really any other publishers at that time. Of course, there was Marvel. Marvel really had nothing under its belt that had this kind of a shift in the I kind of hate to use the word zeitgeist, but really is. I mean, as far as comic books were concerned, these leveled the playing field. There was nothing that could be superior beyond this. Of course, I don't think that's true, but it's pretty damn close. So, but let's talk about the film. Now, the film has been divided wisely into two parts. They're both going to be about 70 odd, they're both going to be, I'm sure, probably about 70 odd minutes in length, which is the right length of time. Because we have here, because there are 4 books, there are 4 issues in this, and each of them takes up about a half an hour, a little bit over a half an hour of screen time as far as adapting them to a filmed format, whether it's animation or if somebody tried to replicate this in regular film. Of course, I mean, it would never work in live action. This tale would never work that way. So, so basically, you know, Sam Register and Bruce Timm, who are kind of, you know, Bruce Timm, of course, being the head of, you know, DC Animated. Sam Register kind of being like, you know, one of the other big names there, brought this tale to us. And this basically covers a lot of the events, a lot of the action from the first 2 issues of the 4-issue series. Now, again, those of you who are uninitiated, the story basically takes place, it begins to the day 10 years after the last appearance of Batman. Not the disappearance, but just the last appearance of Batman in Gotham City. And no one has seen or heard from him until tonight. Now, we have an older Bruce Wayne, probably in his 50s, and he has... essentially, he is courting death in other ways. You know, as this film opens with, unfortunately, sadly, computer generated car, you know, like Formula One type of race, and you know, he's driving and he's ignoring all the potential dangers, and of course, you know, and I'll talk a little bit more about the computer-generated stuff in a bit. But you know, it basically, you know, it kind of pinwheels and explodes, but you know, Bruce Wayne bails out at the last moment. And then later on that night, we get Bruce Wayne and Jim Gordon, who is basically going to be retired within the next couple of days. He's going to retire in the next couple of days. We see Bruce Wayne drinking alcohol for the first time. We've never seen this before, because of course, you know, his whole thing was, you know, obviously he needed to stay strong, he needed to stay clear-headed. So he would, you know, as they refer to in the, you know, in this scene and also in the book, that, you know, he used to, you know, kind of fake everybody out with ginger ale, pretending it was champagne. Now, we have, of course, the kind of revelation that Jim Gordon now knows that Bruce Wayne was Batman all along. And what we have here is they discuss a number of things that's going on. But one of the things, kind of the elephant in the room, is that basically since, well, they do discuss this in the film, that most of organized crime in Gotham City is gone. All of Batman's rogues gallery are nowhere to be seen or heard from, with 2 exceptions: Harvey Dent and the Joker. They are both in the Arkham home for the emotionally troubled. Now again, here's where we get into kind of the social commentary / satire of this, because of course, you know, for many years this was Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane, and now it is Arkham Home for the emotionally troubled. You see that there is a kind of political correctness that Frank Miller is kind of, right off the bat, he is trying to attack. And or at least, you know, at least satirize. We have this reveal of this Dr. Bartholomew Walper, who in the film is voiced quite excellently by Michael McKean. Of course, I think most famously of you know, as you know, David St. Hubbins in This Is Spinal Tap. but also more recently in the DC universe played the character of Perry White on Smallville. And, makes sense because he is actually in real life the husband of Annette O'Toole, who, of course, played Martha Kent for many, many years on Smallville. Actually through the entire series, but she was absent for a lot of the last couple of seasons. So, we have this Dr. Walper, who has essentially, he has written this best-selling book called Hey, I'm Okay. And he is, kind of a very positive, kind of rehabilitator. He sees himself almost as I don't think he sees himself necessarily as a glory hound, but he certainly achieves the status of one because he is, he takes on these very high-profile cases, such as that of Harvey Dent. And basically a plastic surgeon over the last several years, they have obviously kind of perfected their ways, and they have actually made both sides of Harvey Dent's face normal. But more so than these, and the Joker has been essentially in a state of catatonia since he's been put away, since the last time he was put away in Arkham Asylum, which is now, again, Arkham Home for the emotionally troubled. But he's just been in a, like I said, total catatonic trance. He's just kind of staring blankly at the walls and so on and so forth. And basically what we have here is that there has been another criminal element that has arisen in Gotham City, and it's that of the mutants. Now, the mutants are basically these strangely adorned, strangely dressed, strange speaking with their whole this very odd slang, this very kind of non-futuristic, futuristic slang that basically they're not just a gang; they are out-and-out killers. They are, 10 times beyond that of your normal street gang. There are thousands of members, and they all wear the same kind of colors. Now, this would be probably Frank Miller's kind of non-racial exploration of the emergence of the deadlier street gangs that were coming to power, coming to rise in the 80s. Of course, beginning with the trafficking of cocaine and so on and so forth, and then crack eventually making its way onto the streets in the mid 80s, and so I mean, they're all very pale. They're all, like I said, very strangely adorned, and they have strange piercings. They have their leader. This leader is this huge hulking mass of evil. He has his teeth filed like razors. He has claws. He has these strange, like, nipple coverings. I know it's kind of absurd when you really kind of look at it, but really it's that this force has basically, it is the next generation. It is a more cruel generation. And because it's never explained why exactly, not really, but it's never really explained why Bruce Wayne stopped being Batman. But there's only really one hint to that, and that is apparently something happened to Jason Todd. Now, this was written in 1986, which predates Death in the Family by a couple of years, so it's actually quite fascinating that this was somewhat prophetic in its storytelling. Although it's never explicitly said, yes, Jason Todd died, but it's very, very, very implied. And basically we have Bruce Wayne struggling to maintain his retirement. But it's just come to a certain point in time where he can't. He just can't do it anymore. He cannot remain apathetic to the crime that is sweeping through the city. He cannot remain Bruce Wayne anymore. He is a hollow shell that encases and tries to weigh down the Batman. And even subconsciously, like he has a mustache at the beginning of this, and then suddenly it's gone. He doesn't know exactly what might have happened. I mean, obviously he knows that he shaved it, but he doesn't really recall that he shaved it, because it's something in him that wants out. And it, of course, is the Batman. And we get just that. As Harvey Dent is released by the Arkham home under the supervision of Dr. Walper, he escapes. And it's first thought that he's just trying to kind of be reclusive. But it becomes very evident to Bruce that he has once again turned back to his criminal ways. And these ways, they won't be subtle once he finally reveals himself. But Batman himself has finally revealed himself. And in one night, he cuts a swath through Gotham's criminal element, through the underworld. And in the course of this, he stops two young girls from being murdered by the mutants, the Slicer-Dicers. And one of those girls is a young girl named Carrie Kelly, who, in turn, is very inspired by her savior, and decides to purchase an old Robin costume, put it on, and start her attempts at fighting crime, which are done, her initial attempts are very humorous in this book, or in this film. They're a little bit more, they do follow the beats of the book very specifically, but just, there are a couple things that they change. Now, of course, we have the inevitable confrontation between Batman and Harvey, who is basically, he's purchased two helicopters, a really, old, Army surplus job, and a really newfangled, beautiful kind of war attack chopper. And he's going to set them on Gotham's, now they do not call it this in the book, or in the movie, but in the book, these were called Gotham's Twin Towers. Now, it's understandable why they would want to stay away from using that terminology. Obviously, in this world, in the world of post 9/11, it's that term, just the idea of twin towers would have a much more, they have a much deeper meaning for us as people now. I mean, not just even in the United States, but everywhere across the world. Everybody knows of the events of 9/11. But they call it's now called, I think, the Key. One of them is called the Key Building, and one of them is just doesn't have a name. But he's planning to blow them up. He wants $22 million. And Batman, of course, kind of saves the day here. And then it is on to Batman versus the mutants. And versus specifically the mutant leader. And again, these are the last few moments of Gordon's time with the Force. and he enlists Gordon's help really for the last time, because a new commissioner is going to be become effective immediately after his retirement, and it is this woman named Captain Ellen Yindel, who has a very specific point of view about Batman, that he is a vigilante, he is breaking the law, and he will be arrested. So all of these things converge into these, you have these kind of, not subplots, but these small moments that appeared in the book that make their way to the screen. Now, this film, you're going to hear me say it a lot. I'm going to mean film, but I mean book, and I'm going to mean I'm going to mean book, and I'm going to say film, and I'm going to mean film, and I'm going to say book. So just let's get that in our heads right now. This first chapter, which is the first part, if you will, are the first two chapters of The Dark Knight Returns. Now, it is, of course, very exciting to see an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns. Having people like Peter Weller as the voice of Bruce Wayne / Batman is really cool. It's a lot of fun to play around with. This is mostly filled with, unlike many of DC's other explorations into the animated world, they really kind of cut down on the celebrity voicing here. Peter Weller is the only voice that's really, kind of instantly recognizable, and we just know that this is, someone who is, he's very known. He's very well known, obviously, in not even just the the film community as a whole, but also, of course, in the genre circles for, of course, his work on RoboCop and various other things, such as 24, what have you. He's Peter Weller. He's Peter Weller. Everybody knows who he is. But as far as the rest of the cast, we have David Selby, who is a character actor who voices Jim Gordon. As I look at his list of credits here, he was in Falcon Crest. He was in Dark Shadows, back from 1966, Dark Shadows. And the most recent thing that I had seen him in was his work on in The Social Network, where he actually plays, those of you who have seen it, he actually plays the attorney for the Winklevosses. We have Wade Williams doing the voice of Harvey Dent. Again, very very accomplished voiceover actor. We have Ariel Winter, who is a very young person. And again, like, for instance, Wade Williams, he was the voice of in Batman Under the Red Hood. He was the voice of Black Mask. He was he's done, like I said, a lot of voices over the years. But he also has been in a lot of television. For instance, those of you who might even know this, he was actually the warden at Blackgate in The Dark Knight Rises. So if you can think back to who he played, you can see who he is. But he is, again, he's a very accomplished voice actor, but he's also a very accomplished television and film actor. But again, he's a character player. And basically, the cast that they assemble all do very commendable jobs. But we have to remember something very specific here. That this is an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns. It is not literally just we are putting basically a motion comic on screen. We're not using every bit of dialogue from the book. We're not using every plot line. We're not using every bit of this. We're not using every bit of that. Things are shifted. Things are changed around. They're put, this moment's put here. This moment is put way at the beginning. Most of these other moments come further towards the end. Some scenes are completely cut out. And some things just change the narrative. But they don't change it to a point, and they surprise us with certain things too, which is also nice. Obviously, when you have such a beloved and very well-known text, something that I've read, I don't know how many times, at least 100, they have to change things in order to make it interesting. But some of the changes that they have to make because this is kind of the DC animated universe. Hence, the emphasis on animated is that they have to take out some of the more objectionable parts of this in order to make room for what will come next. Now, the violence, surprisingly enough, is very much there. But certain moments are very much not. Because, again, this was very much, this was kind of an attack on the 80s, as Frank Miller originally wrote it. But a lot of that is actually still there. A lot of the social commentary is still there, and I'm really, really glad they've kept that, that through line for this. Because that could very easily have just been done away with in favor of showing the more extravagant action pieces. Now, the animation, apart from the CG stuff, because, I mean, let's face it, I mean, it's just kind of lazy at this point in time, because, and it's mostly in the vehicular scenes. The helicopters, the race cars at the beginning, none of them are hand-drawn. They're all CG. And that really, really does stand out. It makes for kind of a very messy frame, because everything else is hand-drawn. So it's like, why would they go this way? But, the first appearance of Batman should have been more dramatic. As it was on the page. But it's kind of dialed back in order to, and understandably, keep a more consistent rhythm in the scene, because things read in books very differently than they would display on the screen. That is one of the things that this does get right. For instance, the fight scenes between Batman and the mutant leader are extremely well choreographed. They do get to some of the same beats as they got to in the comic. They are just as savage as they read on the page, and these are all really good things, except some of them, instead of them, and I'll get to this, because this is my next problem. I'll call it a problem. It's really more of a preference than it is a problem, because those of you who might go into this just watching this, who haven't read The Dark Knight Returns dozens of times, and are just not as familiar with it as many of us fanboys are, call a spade, will not miss too many of the moments of dialogue. And the biggest problem for me to overcome was the lack of the internal monologue. Because we have a lot of things going on inside Bruce's head. But here's where, unfortunately, the film does make a mistake. Is that they do bring some of that internal monologue in for the scene in which basically Bruce Wayne is struggling with the reemergence of Batman. He is definitely, they really bring in that internal monologue. I wish that, okay, if they're going to go there at all, let's go even further. Let's have the scene play out in a somewhat extended fashion with the same rhythms, but with some of the internal monologue. And give us some of the really, really cool dialogue that's in the book. Now, a lot of it's there, you know, like, I mean, you know, about the whole, you know, this isn't a mud hole, this is an operating table, and I'm the surgeon. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, that is Frank Miller's Batman to a T, and I'm so glad that they left that in. Again, a lot of the violence, a lot of the social commentary is still very present, but is it a little dated? No, not quite, because they do all of these same things. They, you know, the discussion of, you know, vigilantism. These are things that were somewhat prevalent, or at least they were touched upon within the Nolan Batman films. You know, whether or not it's okay to have, you know, someone who is patrolling the cities basically beyond the touch of the law, and, you know, to do anything he wants, basically forgetting things like civil rights, forgetting things like due process, and just, you know, he is at war with crime. And this is, of course, one of the things that makes Batman Batman, but one of the things that Frank Miller brought into the discussion is that, yeah, really, I mean, in this day and age, I mean, can't we actually talk about what this means? Now, as Frank Miller's style evolved over the years, you would tend to think that his personification of Batman as someone who is a bit of a fascist is something that he's actually okay with, and almost not promoting, but something that he feels is totally justified for this character. Is that basically Batman, almost like, if we're going to just bring about another kind of analog to this character, for instance, in more popular media, the character of Jack Bauer in 24. You know, this is someone who is almost answerable to no one. There is no one he will not harm, no one he will not torture, no one whose rights he will not violate in order to save the day. And Batman essentially is very much the same way. Is that there isn't a thing he won't do except kill. He will not kill. Now, of course, as I'm watching this, as I'm watching the Batmobile sequence, it's really hard to believe that nobody's getting killed here. As much as it was hard to believe that nobody was getting killed in the book. But at least, you know, like I said, in that kind of inner monologue, you have him talking about that he's using rubber bullets. And of course, we do get to that point where the mutant leader in the film, he picks up one of Batman's rubber bullets and kind of comments, you know, rubber bullets. You know, so that, you know, his shootings are non-lethal. And we do get to that moment, for instance, when the baby is kidnapped, and Batman has the M60 and shoots the other mutant. Now, in the book, to be fair, I have always seen that as almost kind of a justifiable homicide, and I always knew that in the back of my mind I was wrong about that, because Batman doesn't kill. He doesn't do that. So it must have been some other kind of better wound. You know, just a clean wound that took the, you know, that took the mutant out of the game. But you know, like, it looks like he's actually killed them. But in this, they make it much more clear that no, that did not happen. He did not kill the mutant. He just shot her in the hand to disarm her. So with an M60 at close range, she's, you know, pretty good shot, and to have that not like pass through the gun, you know. But again, this is reality versus comic book. So again, it hits pretty much all the same beats, but it does hit them in different order. It's enough to keep us on our toes as viewers who are familiar with the text, and I mean, this is certainly, this would not be what I would consider to be a great thing for a new viewer to watch, to go in kind of blind to this. Because I don't think that this film, unfortunately, develops as much of the subtleties of the commentary and of the satire and of the moments that made the book so great to film. Mostly because it's just really hard to do that kind of stuff. But the other thing being is that, yes, Bruce Timm has made, obviously, a very conscious choice to kind of tone back on some of the rhetoric, to tone back on some of the violence, not too much, because this is very much a PG-13 book, and a PG-13, I did it again, a PG-13 animated film. But, again, you cannot have the film without the book existing, obviously, but you cannot fully appreciate the film without being a fan of the book. This is one of those things where it's just like, this is made for fans of Batman. This is not made for fans of the Nolan films, although people who appreciate the Nolan films more than like the Burton or Schumacher films will get more out of this. They're not, this may inspire certain people to go out and get The Dark Knight Returns, which would be great. And, and then read it and see how it's different and so on and so forth. But people who might go into this blind will be a little lost. And speaking of lost, is that we do get the introduction that we had in the book, although it came a lot earlier, of the Joker. Now, in the original book, he is introduced much more immediately with a much more kind of, overall view of him. We see him just kind of sitting there motionless, almost lifeless. The color, I mean, he was pale before, but he's actually almost more skin-toned now. The color is completely gone from his, kind of cherry red lips, and, just all of the, gleaming insanity has left his eyes. But we have the darling moment, which comes at the very end. This is the break point. This is basically Kill Bill Volume 1 and Kill Bill Volume 2. It's kind of how they're shaping this up, is that we are going to get finally to the final confrontation between Batman and the Joker in the next part. Now, I have yet to watch all the special features on this. I have yet to even watch the coming of the Part 2 moments. So, and as I was referencing, as I was speaking of Lost, the voice of the Joker will be that, and I think this is incredibly inspired and totally awesome, will be that of the voice of Michael Emerson, who, again, genre fans will know who Michael Emerson is. He played Benjamin Linus in Lost. He is now playing Harold Finch in Person of Interest. So again, two very kind of genre-centric shows, and, someone with a great voice for the Joker at this stage in his life. Because a lot of the kind of anarchic joy has left him, the kind of, just insane laughter that we would get in a normal kind of Mark Hamill-like Joker. And, on the page, he is much more, he's much calmer. He's much more sedate. But there is still the vitality, the violence, the horror that we will be getting to in the next part. Jay Oliva, who's worked on the DC Universe for some time now, this is basically his directorial debut, and it was adapted by Bob Goodman. I don't know who that is. but he's not a name that I've seen a lot as far as these types of adaptations are concerned, because a lot of Batman mythology has been and Superman mythology has been brought from page to screen. So people like Sam Liu and Lauren Montgomery, these are names that I know, and obviously Bruce Timm. But he hasn't actually directed any of these. He's just kind of oversees all of them. Of course, Andrea Romano, doing her great cast direction. One of the things that really struck me, though, was the excellent score by Christopher Drake. Christopher Drake, who I know has done other DC work. For the life of me, I cannot remember exactly what else he's done because I'm getting him confused with Christopher Carter, who did some really excellent work on Batman Beyond. And of course did the great kind of opening, if you remember Batman Beyond, you remember the opening sequence of that, and how awesome that was, and just the music, that it was just great. But I mean, the score in this is terrific. It's very, very, get your blood pumping type of stuff. Not in a, kind of rock and roll way, but in an orchestral, very kind of Hans Zimmer-esque way. So that was quite wonderful. That I thought was a big, big standout for me, was how good the score was. Now, the other things that are on this disc is that there's a featurette on, on Carrie Kelly becoming Robin. There will be a featurette called Batman and Me, the Bob Kane story, which should really be called the Bob Kane, Bill Finger story, but it isn't. And 2 bonus cartoons. It has actually like a sneak peek at a previously released Superman Batman one, which is one of my favorites of the DC animated universe, which is Public Enemies. I just love that. And it has 2 cartoons on it. I don't know which ones they are yet. If the episode of Batman the Animated Series Legends of the Dark Knight is not on this list, I will be sorely disappointed, because that was, until now, the first representation of the idea of the Dark Knight in the Batman animated universe. And of course, one of the things that I have yet to talk about is the animation. Aside from the CG, it's excellent. The reproduction of Frank Miller's very kind of squarey, sketchy art, these huge jaws, these huge, incredibly imposing muscles. It's obviously such a radical shift from Batman Year One, which is, Mazzucchelli, very, kind of very slim, very slender, very athletic, but still, that this man's got power. But this is, Batman is presented, and even as Bruce Wayne, he's fucking huge. And so, I mean, all of the bodies in this are, oversized and stylized, and it's just, you can see kind of how Batman the Animated Series kind of gleaned on to sort of this style. It's much more kind of straight lines as opposed to more curvature, but again, you can see a little bit of Frank Miller's influence on that. All in all, I would say this is, it's a 9 out of 10. For fans, this is really good. For non-fans, for people who are not familiar with this story, I would say this would probably be about a 6 or maybe a 7 out of 10. Because, to be totally frank, unless you really know what you're getting into, you're not going to appreciate it that much. And you're going to think, what the hell is this all about? But that is, as they say, that for this edition of the Shadow Gallery, this special edition of the Shadow Gallery. So I want to thank you for watching. If this is your first time here, please subscribe. Thumb it up, thumb it down, comment, criticize, complain. I'm actually thinking about using this as a kind of contest for those of you who might not have it yet, because As you may or may not know, this Blu-ray does come with a DVD. I never use these DVDs. I usually give them to my father when I have the Blu-ray / DVD packs, but I know that my dad's not going to want to watch this one, so it's worth thinking about. Yeah. But anyway, so that is it, as I said, for this edition of the Shadow Gallery. Again, please subscribe, please comment, criticize, complain, and thumb it up, thumb it down. Tell me what you think about it. Tell me what you think about my take on it. And we'll see you probably Sunday night with our next installment of New Comics, bitches! Which, if this is your first time here, that is my normal... that is my normal weekly vlog on the new comics of each week. So, again, thanks for tuning in. This is James Donnelly from the Shadow Gallery, saying goodbye and good night, and reminding you, as always, to stay in the shadows.